Good morning and welcome to the morning briefing. It's Thursday, December 16th, and it's episode number 158. You're supposed to be seeing Phil Brandt right now, but after 158 episodes, Phil apparently is having a little bit of technical difficulty joining the program this morning, but we do expect to see him here somewhat soon. So for now, at least for the time being, I am your host of the program, and it is always our goal to keep you informed so that you can more effectively lead your organization. Good morning, producer Nick. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm just enjoying the exciting parts of live broadcasting, and I think Phil is in a temporary space right now, so I don't think it's his typical professional setup. However, he will be here. I have confidence. How are you?
I have confidence as well. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We've got several things to cover today, including mask mandates in St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and where things stand there. I want to talk about the EEOC's pronouncement yesterday that COVID can be a disability. Really, it doesn't change anything that we've already been discussing on the program. We'll also talk about the status of the Biden administration's COVID rules. They're sort of on the 3 strikes and you're out game plan there, but it appears that one of the strikes may be under booth review, under the umpire's video reviews. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll talk about that today. And real quickly, before we do that, let's jump to today's poll question. Oh, I see our friend Phil is back. So maybe Phil, you may want to handle the poll question now that you've arrived and your technology seems to be sorted out.
Well, you just give it one moment, and I'm sure it's going to give me fits there, Bert. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for that technical difficulty, but if you listen to the radio, watch television, it even happens there. So I do apologize for that. Today's poll question, Bert, let's see. I have it pulled up. Do you have regular practices for emergency shelter and or evacuation drills to ensure the safety of your employees in the event of severe weather? Considering all the recent events with tornadoes and so on, that's the question. Do you practice emergency shelter and or evacuation drills? And here are your choices. They are not regularly, once a year, twice a year, or more than twice a year. That's the question. Obviously, in light of all the recent tragedy that we've had, that's top of mind for all of us, and our thoughts and prayers go out to all the people and family that's been affected by that. But it's a good time
we are
for us
already getting some results as well, Phil. So
awesome.
And that's going to be at where we talked about last time in the links and downloads section on the right-hand side with the little check mark.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. But that's definitely the question. And I do want to just remind, in light of those events, all of our listeners on a particular tool that we have available. If you are a member of AIM, you have this tool available to you. It is 100% included in your membership. It doesn't cost you anything more. And it's a tool we designed specifically for notifications, and it's called our AIM2 Connect app. It allows you and all of your employees to download the app, and if you needed to, you can send out emergency alerts to your employees for them to take shelter, regardless to where they're at. I know my personal experience with managing safety and employees over a large campus is sometimes not everyone can hear the warnings. We know in certain counties when they're really large, you don't always have the the tornado or the storm can be in one part of the county, and you might be in another part of the county, and you're choosing to have employees not take shelter just yet because someone is monitoring the scenario, and you're not in a high risk area of the county. But the app would allow you to send a quick alert, go off on everyone's phone at one time, and have everyone take shelter if they were beyond the normal distance and being able to hear or see any audio or visual alarm systems that you might have. So it helps with that wherever they might be. That's called the AIM2 Connect app. We designed it for you to use very specifically in these scenarios. Contact your account executive if you would like to know more. You can visit our website to learn more, and or tell your friends if you think they may benefit from it as well. But what a tragedy, Humbert.
Yeah, really, really pretty scary. I mean, it's we hear all about global warming, which is now morphed into climate change, and it is unusual to see uh, these types of storms in December. Really tragic what happened over there in Kentucky, and of course, on some listeners' minds are things like what is employers should we be doing in these situations? I think a lot of us have heard about or read in the news about what happened at the Amazon facility that apparently, according to the news reports, uh, that the Amazon, some of the supervisors told people they can't leave work, or if they do, that they'd be terminated. So puts employers in a difficult situation. Of course, at the end of the day, when people are balancing their lives, literally their lives versus their employment, hopefully most people will make the right decision. I guess the other question I have is that if you're in the middle of a tornado warning, are you better off trying to shelter in a building or hopping in your car and driving? It's just a really difficult situation, and there's probably no good answers there.
Well, I think you're right. There's better, good, better, and best answers, but maybe no really good answers. And I think that's the importance of having these things thought out and discussed before we're confronted with those decisions and in a time of the emergency. Having practiced safety myself, being an ex-safety manager for many years, I know it is not cut and dry where you can put, sometimes hundreds and or 1,000 plus people in a facility where it might be safe during a storm, but also at the same time, it may not be the best thing for people to get in their cars. I'm not sure, I read the news reports. I know nothing more than anyone else who has read the news reports about supervisors saying if you leave, you get fired. I can't get caught up in that. What I can do is say we need to have identified procedures. And this is the importance of our supervisors being trained regardless of the topic. And it's just tough. It's a tough thing to train supervisors when you're low on supervisors and they're already working a lot of hours, but sometimes this training results in life or death. And whether that's emergency evacuation training, whether that's the indicia training that we just had the preview on prior to the show as it relates to impairment of drug and alcohol, or just overall, proper people skills and engagement related training. Training is that key for supervisors. I'll go to my grave with that one. I just know that's the only way. We can't assume people know what to do, particularly when the pressure is on. And that there's no shortcut for the training. It's just something we have to do.
Yeah, it's I go back, Phil, and it's like most workplaces, or a lot of workplaces. You and I work in office buildings, and it's a little bit easier during a tornado to figure out what to do. In an office building, you head down to the lowest floors, you get away from the windows. You don't get in the elevator, but you try to be near the elevator, shafts and stuff like that. In a warehouse facility, it's just much more difficult. They probably don't have any type of basement or emergency shelter. And so, it's like winning the negative or reverse lottery. I mean, the tornadoes, it's just wherever it hits is going to get the damage. Chances are, it's not going to be a wide swath of damage, but if you're in the area where the damage is, it can obviously be severe or fatal. I was on the phone yesterday with a client who was driving from one factory to another down in Arkansas, and ended up pulling into a Sonic restaurant, and the staff graciously allowed him and the other customers that were there at the time to come into their building and actually get into the food refrigerator at the facility. So that was very nice of those employees at Sonic. But not everybody has a steel box built into their facility that they can get into. So just a really tough situation. And I agree with you that companies really should take some time to think about disaster planning and emergency preparedness.
Yeah, I want to cover some of the things that are covered in the 29 CFR 1910.38B as it relates to the standard for what is required for emergency action planning. And in my opinion, the OSHA standard is very vague in this space, but I believe it's because there's such a wide variety of employers that are covered. The difference between a warehouse, a bank, a supermarket, a high-rise building. We're trying to cover all those scenarios. Nick, while I'm maybe covering these topics, maybe you can get ready to pull the poll up. I'm kind of curious what kind of results we're seeing. But here are the key points that must be covered in your emergency standard planning. It's a means of reporting for fires and other emergencies, whether that's an alarm, audible. You do have to consider impairments that people have with hearing and or visual for that, but you have to have a means of reporting for fires and other emergencies. And that's where I also think some of the Aim to Connect app can help. You have to have evacuation procedures and emergency escape routes and assignments. Those procedures should cover evacuation routes, whether you're leaving the facility because of fire or other immediate hazard on site, and or if you're taking shelter. Procedures for employees who remain to operate critical plant operations before they evacuate, because in some scenarios you have to be careful with how you shut down equipment, because they may be absolutely more hazardous than the emergencies that we might be facing. Accounting for all employees, of course, how we do that. And in today's world with things on the cloud, it's not as easy as you grab the clipboard and you got everyone's name on it and you can check it off. So you have to have procedures for that, and people have to know how to do it. And we can see in the wake of this most recent tornado how difficult that would be for those who had that responsibility following the disaster. Rescue and medical duties for employees performing them, and then names and job titles for persons who can be contacted. And again, that's one thing to say, oh, it's all electronic. It's another thing to not have access to the electronics. So those are the things that OSHA requires. Of course, you have to go into depth on those as it relates to your facility. You can check if you're also a member on the AIMS BLR website for safety, and you can pull that standard up. And this is just a really good top of mind time to go through that with your leadership team and decide whether or not you need to practice, sharpen up the policy or procedure, or what you need to do next to be prepared for that. What I can assure people are that employees are wondering, what about me, and what is my employer going to do for me to look after me at this time? This is top of mind for them. So, Nick, what do we got for the poll?
Okay, so we have 57.9% are not regularly. And we also have, so coming in second place so far is 21.1% is once per year. And we can see that everything else kind of gets spread out
Falls
there.
in between there.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm thinking, from a marketing standpoint and optics is, and thinking about that Aim to Connect app, you have people in situations they're not normally in, and I tuned in that morning after the storm and looked at an interview, and we had an employee, an Amazon employee was interviewed, and the question that she was asked was, had you been through training to know where to go in the event of a storm? And she's like, and so the reporter followed up again, and she's like, no, but I'm new, I haven't. So when I think of that Aim to Connect app, I think of sending out that message again saying,
Where to go?
just
What
a
to do?
reminder of how to handle those things. To say, I have no comment, but sending it to the PR department. The contact at the PR department to handle those things. So, yeah, it was an interesting interview. That's for sure.
All right, so there you go. You have some tools available. We know what we need to do, and maybe this is just a good time for us to focus on that. Bert, let's move forward and let's get an update on the OSHA Emergency Temporary Standard. I continuously get asked about that. I'm sure you do as well. It's on the minds of our listeners. Is there anything to update from the last time we talked about it? Okay, Bert, I can't hear you, buddy. I think you're muted.
We're having all kinds of technical difficulties today, Phil. So yes, there's a couple little developments that have taken place out there. Everybody is, of course, aware, as I said before, that the Biden administration is pretty much has struck out with its 3 areas of vaccine mandates. And of course, that's in the area of healthcare, the OSHA ETS, and government contractors. With respect to the OSHA ETS, the most recent developments, obviously, OSHA suspended enforcement of the ETS. Remember, December 5th and then January 4th were supposed to be big days under the OSHA ETS, and OSHA is not enforcing those. We remember that the Fifth Circuit issued a decision basically staying enforcement of the OSHA ETS. That appeal got consolidated into the Sixth Circuit, which is a very, very Republican presidential dominated court. So the by far the majority of the judges in the Sixth Circuit were appointed by Republican presidents. However, yesterday news came out that this case is going to be heard by a 3-judge panel, not by the full court. And so that means that there is the possibility that 2 or 3 of the 3-judge panels, which is the normal process, could be judges who were appointed by Democrat presidents. So it is still possible that ETS could be put back into effect by that court. My hunch is, and again, this is early, is that if a 3-judge panel reviews it and makes a pronouncement that the ETS goes back into force, there's a couple of ways that can be dealt with by the other side, and that is they can seek what's called a rehearing en banc, which means that the rehearing that they would be asking the Sixth Circuit to review the decision of the 3-judge panel, and they would be asking the entire Sixth Circuit to make that review, or the case would likely then head up to the Supreme Court, either way.
Yeah. So at this point, we're still a wait and see. While we see the country, I think, becoming more divided. If we went back 8 weeks ago, people seem to be moving in the direction, employers seem to be moving in the direction of mandating the vaccines, hospitals across the country. Now I read more and more about hospitals that are reversing that mandate, and employers seem to be divided more now than ever on whether to mandate or not mandate based upon regulation requirements.
Yeah, I think I had described it, Phil, that when these when the 3 trifecta of executive orders and executive or administrative guidance was coming out in the healthcare area with OSHA and with the government contractors. And I think part of what the Biden administration was trying to do is whether or not these executive orders or the administrative pronouncements actually went into effect or were upheld by the courts. One thing it did was it kickstarted employers across the country into a compliance mode anyway. And so I think from a perception standpoint, a fear of this being implemented, employers rushed to try to comply and implement their own vaccine mandates, even in the private sector. And the way I described it is I would say that I said that the water was at the top of the floodgates initially and was starting to splash over. I think we got to the point where the water was at the top of the floodgates and it was pouring over the floodgates, but those floodgates never quite opened. And a lot of employers are still taking the wait and see attitude. And maybe we're getting back to a place where the water isn't necessarily pouring over the floodgates. It's still streaming over the floodgates, but not pouring over, as we're seeing employers sort of retreat on the vaccine mandates. And you mentioned the healthcare one. Yesterday, there was a ruling by an appellate court from the Fifth Circuit, actually, that gave the Biden administration maybe a glimmer of hope that the healthcare vaccine mandate will be resurrected. That court, I have not read the decision, but what it did, my understanding is that it basically said that the healthcare mandate is not in effect in roughly 14 or so states, but is in effect in other states.
Yeah.
And so they gave the Biden administration maybe a glimmer of hope there that that will survive. They did make a point in that decision, though, to say that this is headed for the Supreme Court. Yeah. And so we'll have to see how that shakes out. And then, of course, the last one to fall was that government contractor mandate, and the courts again have put a halt to the government contractor mandate. So with all of that, we've seen quite a bit in the news lately with these healthcare systems, these massive healthcare systems that were requiring vaccines for all of their employees. They are starting to scale back, and we're seeing a lot of that take place across the country. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, the law so far seems to be on the side of not mandating the vaccines. And number two, and we've been dealing with this all year, is a worker shortage. And there are some states, I believe New York has even called out the National Guard to help staff hospitals because they don't have enough people working in the hospitals because of the COVID vaccine mandate. So I think you are seeing some of these large health systems pull back. I think the policy goal of the Biden administration, whether these executive orders and the administrative guidance is ultimately upheld or rejected, the policy goals of the administration have still largely been met because it did sort of force employers to deal with the issue. And a lot of employers who did deal with the issue and implemented the vaccine mandates, well, the horse is sort of out of the gate already, and they've made that decision and they're going down that road.
Yeah, and nothing in any of these decisions interfere with a private employer requiring vaccine mandates. They may still do that. There's plenty of court case law that supports private employers making their own requirements. Put the government requirements to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Exactly. Those private employers still have a right to mandate masked vaccines, whatever they want to do in their workplace, so long as they are making reasonable accommodations, which, Phil, that's reasonable accommodations for religion and for disability. And that's actually a really good segue into another development that happened yesterday as well. And that is that the EEOC yesterday came out with some new guidance on their website. And this is on the EEOC's EEOC.gov. In the section, what you should know about COVID-19. Section N is in Nancy, and it's entitled COVID-19 and the definition of disability under the ADA and Rehabilitation Act. And Phil, I know I'm not batting 1,000, but I'm pretty darn close here. And I think what we've said all along is that basically as an employer, you can't just have a bright line rule that says either you get vaccinated or you're fired. You have to make exceptions for religion. You have to make exceptions for disabilities. And very importantly, although you may not ultimately be able to accommodate the person with the religious or the disability, the religious issue or the disability, you still have to go through that individualized assessment, which with each of those people, each of those folks, to determine if there is a reasonable accommodation that can be offered. And that's really what the EEOC is getting at in its guidance. They talk about that individualized analysis. They talk about that if somebody has COVID-19 but they're asymptomatic, that person would not be disabled under the ADA. If the person has symptoms that are kind of like the flu, again, they're not disabled under the ADA. Now, if the person has something worse, something we've heard about called long COVID, or they're hospitalized, or it goes on for months, or they have this brain fog that we've heard about with long COVID, those things can be disabilities under the ADA. And that's, again, when you have to go through that individualized analysis to determine if COVID itself can be a disability. Remember, this also doesn't change the guidance we've been talking about all along, that if somebody seeks an accommodation for any other health-related reason that puts them in a situation where they cannot safely be vaccinated, again, we have to go through that individualized analysis and determine if we can accommodate. Like I said, at the end of the day, we may not be able to accommodate, but we can't have that bright line rule that just simply says either get vaccinated, or if you don't, you're done. And you know what? If you get COVID, the same thing under this new Section N, you can't just terminate the employee. They may be entitled to leave or some other accommodation due to their contracting of COVID.
So I think you just answered Nicole's question, Bert, online here, where she was asking 50 employers, private company, and they are going to a vaccine mandate effective January 1st. However, they have some employees who work from home in other regions, but do call on customers from time to time. And she was curious, can she require that mandate for them? Because they work from home most of the time out of the region. And the answer, simply put, is yes, you can, with every qualification that you just mentioned.
Yes, you just as long as you're making potential accommodations for religion and disability. At the end of the day, I know Nicole's put in the chat here that these employees are currently required to follow individual health protocols for the businesses they call on and visit in their regions across the U.S. And if vaccination is a visitation requirement and they're not vaccinated, they cannot call on those customers. And so if you have one of your employees, Nicole, who's refusing to get vaccinated, if it's not a religious reason, if it's not a disability related reason, then in all likelihood you can terminate or put the employee on leave, subject to other state laws in that particular state. And if you go down that reasonable accommodation process, you have to decide as the employer, can this reasonably be accommodated for a salesperson? Can these sales calls, in other words, be done remotely or via Zoom? Those are the issues you have to wrestle with.
Great. All right, Bert, I want to get on to another question from Cynthia here. She's asking, what's going on with the city mask mandate? I assume she's referring to St. Louis City. Why are they exempt from judges' rulings?
Yeah, so so I'm not sure why the city thinks they're exempt from the judge's ruling. Of course, a court about a month ago, on what was it, November 23rd, a judge in, I think it was Cole County, Missouri, basically said that these city mask mandates and the mask mandates around the state have exceeded their authority, and therefore the mask mandates are not in effect. St. Louis County, in the face of that, actually decided that they are no longer having a mask mandate. They walked away from it. The city of St. Louis, according to their lawyers, they think that ruling does not apply because the city's health orders were not enacted under that particular law that was overturned. So the city says they're operating under the legislature's June law requiring legislative bodies to pass a mandate every 30 days. And the charter gives the Board of Aldermen the authority to enact health orders by resolution once they are issued. So they think it doesn't apply to them because they weren't operating under those rules, under the rule that was overturned. That's all I can say on that. I don't know that there's been any court challenges to that. I know the Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt said that he would be enforcing that court's decision, but to my knowledge, I'm not aware that the Attorney General has commenced any sort of litigation against the city of St. Louis on that.
All right, Bert, that wraps up our final program for 2021. I just want to thank you personally, Nick, and everyone there at Feature Group, and producer Tim in the background, who's always helping this program go on, for all the great work. And I hope our listeners got some great value out of this year's programming. We will be back on online with you on January 6th. We will be off until then, unless something critical comes up. Then we will have a special edition of the morning briefing. But we will be back at 7:30, January 6th. We will see you then. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a very, very happy holiday season and Happy New Year. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Tell your story, promote your products, communicate with your employees and customers vividly, dynamically, and powerfully. Whether it's a company video, recruitment video, online training, or live meeting, Feature Group can help you, from scripting to highly polished finished production. Whether it's live or on demand, we have the skills and equipment to wow your audience and drive your message home. Feature Group USA, the one-stop shop for all your broadcasting needs.